Hare Krishna. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We'll start with the Mangalacharan.
Yes, sir.
Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Sri Guru Sri Yudapatakalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Setam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripe Vancha Kalpataru Vyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyo Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavranda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we'll continue with text 28, and the remaining are just few short verses. So maybe we'll complete the chapter today. Text 28. This is in meter 11. Nunam ratasnana dineshwaraha samarchito hi asya grihitapanibi pibanti yasaki adaramritam muhur vrajastriya sammumu yadashaya. Nunam ratasnana huta dineshwara samarchito hi asya grihitapanibi pibanti yasaki adaramritam muhur Rajastriya sammumur yadashya. Nunam vritasnana huta dineshwara samarchito hi asya grihita panibi pibanti yasaki adaramritam muhur Rajastriya sammumur yadashya. Okay, anyone want to try?
Sorry, sir. I'm not very good.
Okay, it's okay. Lidgash? Okay, we'll proceed. Synonyms. Nunam, certainly in the previous birth. Vrata, vow. Snana, bath. Putra, sacrifice in the fire. Adina, by all these. Ishvara, the personality of Godhead. Samarchita, perfectly worshipped. He, certainly. Asya, his. Grita, funny being. By the married wives. Pibanti, religious. Yeah, those who. Saki, O friend. Adaramritam, the nectar from his lips. Muhu, again and again. Rajastriya, the damsels of Rajabhumi. Sammumuhu, often fainted. Yad Ashaya, expecting to be favored in that way. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Oh friends, just think of his wives, whose hands he has accepted, how they must have undergone vows, baths, fire, sacrifices, and perfect worship of the Lord of the universe, to constantly relish how the nectar from his lips, now the nectar from his lips by kissing. The damsels of Rajabhumi would often faint just by expecting such favors. So in this chapter, now Lord Krishna is departing to Dwarka from Hastinapura. So when he's about to depart, the Pandavas, all the relatives, and also the residents of Hastinapura, even the common people, they are all relishing by looking at the Supreme Lord, and they are also talking about his glories. So similarly, in most of the verses which we have seen in the past few weeks, the residents of Hastinapur, they are all conversing about the glories of the Supreme Lord as he is about to depart to Dwaraka. So the purport: religious rites prescribed in the scriptures are meant to purify the mundane qualities of the conditioned souls to enable them to be gradually promoted to the stage of rendering transcendental service unto the Supreme Lord. Attainment of this stage of pure spiritual life is the highest perfection, and this stage is called Swarupa, or the factual identity of the living being. Liberation means renovation of this stage of Swarupa. So even in the first few lines of the purport, it has very in-depth meaning. Normally, there's a misconception in our society that bhakti is merely about performing the rituals by going to temple and performing all sorts of rituals, but it's not like that, because bhakti is about spirituality. It is not merely about the ritual. And even from chapter 5 of Bhagavatam, first canto, in the conversation between Narada Muni and Vyasadeva, Narada Muni chastises Vyasadeva by saying that Vyasadeva himself cannot be satisfied with the work that he has done, because apart from Bhagavata Puran, all the other Puranas and other literatures, they merely help the conditioned souls to engage in the Chatur Vargas, or the four pillars, or the four Purusharthas, namely Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Out of these four, the first three, Dharma, Artha, Kama, those are completely related to the material life. Though Moksha, it appears to be like quite related to the spiritual life, but it's mere moksha or mukti is not the be all and end all of spirituality, because on one hand we have mukti, that is liberation or moksha, and on the other hand the other three vargas, or dharma, artha, kama, those are related to bhukti. Bhukti means enjoyment. So neither bhukti or mukti could give us complete satisfaction. Only bhakti does that. That's why in chapter 2 of Bhagavatam, in 1.2.6, there's a verse. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yado bhakti radoksaje ahituki apratyata yayatma suprasidati. Only unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service could provide complete satisfaction to the living entities, mainly for us, the conditioned souls. But it's not that merely the conditioned souls are the ones who need to engage in devotional service. Even the liberated souls in Goloka and Vaikunta, even they are engaged in devotional service, because that is what real Swarupa Siddhi is all about. Real Swarupa Siddhi means to rediscover, to regain our Swarupa, and our Swarupa is that we are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. We fell into this material world the moment we forgot our Swarupa. Instead of being the servants of the Supreme Lord, we wanted to be enjoyers and controllers, and that's why we have fallen into this material world. So the only antidote for that is to regain our Swarupa, and that is to understand that we are meant to be the eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. So liberation is not merely about freeing ourselves from material bondage, but it is to really understand that we are meant to be eternal servants of the Supreme Lord, and we can only gain enjoyment, true enjoyment, by being engaged in devotional service, even after liberation, even after leaving this material world and going to the spiritual world. So even after going to the spiritual world, it's not that we are going to enjoy heavenly pleasures, because even in the material world, even if we perform fruitive activities like the like what is prescribed in the karma kanda portions of the Vedas, so even such heavenly pleasures are only temporary, and we are still going to be trapped in this material world, even by being elevated to the heavenly planets. So, being in order to be qualified to completely eliminate all our material bondages and to be elevated to the spiritual world, we really have to regain our swarupa, and that is, we have to understand that we are meant to be the eternal servants of the Supreme Lord, and that is what true bhakti is all about. Once we actually realize our swarupa, uh, then it really doesn't matter whether we are in the material world or in the spiritual world. We can always remain engaged in devotional service even while being in this material world, because even the elevated souls, the more enlightened souls like Brahma himself, though he is also part of this material creation, he is always engaged in devotional service, and it's just a matter of time before he gets to liberate himself from the material world. But the true realization must be that we really have to understand our true position, our swarupa, and be engaged in unceasing devotional service, uninterrupted and unmotivated. It should be uninterrupted and also unmotivated, in the sense that we should not merely be engaged in bhakti to expect some material benefits, like in Gita 7.15 and 7.16. Krishna talks about the in 7.15, Krishna talks about the types of people who do not surrender to him, and in 7.16 he talks about the types of people who surrender to him. Even among the 4 types of people who surrender to him, Artho, Jignasu, Artharthi, and Jnani, those who are merely seeking material benefits, and also those who are in distress, for such people, even if they, of course, Lord Krishna does appreciate the fact that they are surrendering to him, though they are doing it by expecting material benefits or just to be relieved of some distress. Still, that is considered okay. But of the 4 types of people, Lord Krishna also says that the jnani is the dearmost, because the jnani is the one who has actually discovered his swarupa, and the jnani is the one who knows the true meaning of bhakti. So bhakti should be unmotivated, not simply to seek material benefits, because as long as we remain in this material world, in whatever type of material body, we are always going to be under distress. We are always going to have material needs. So those who seek material benefits, and also those who merely pray to get relief from some distress, they can never achieve everlasting peace. That is only, or the more appropriate word is bliss. So the only way to do that is by discovering our swarupa. And when we talk about these religious rites, the religious rites are merely they are like the stepping stones towards attaining bhakti, because the end goal is bhakti. Whatever rituals and other types of activities that we perform, everything should ultimately culminate in bhakti. Even if we look at the different processes, the different yoga processes, like karma yoga, jnana yoga, or dhyana yoga. So whatever type of yoga that we perform, they should all culminate in Bhakti Yoga. So instead of performing other types of yoga to attain Bhakti Yoga, it is best to engage in Bhakti Yoga straight away. So the end goal is Bhakti, and it is not something which ends. The true realization in Bhakti is that the more service we perform will actually make us keep yearning for more and more service. The more we perform devotional service, we will actually be even more motivated to keep asking for more service. So only that will give us the true satisfaction. So whatever religious rituals that are performed, those are not regarded as true bhakti because they are just meant to be like very preliminary stages in the process of developing bhakti. And so that's why there are, if we look at our scriptural injunctions, there we have this Navaveda Bhakti, and it is not that merely by going to temple alone we can express our bhakti. If we attain true bhakti, we will be able to be engaged in the service, no matter whether we are doing our material duties or in direct spiritual activities. So that is how we can actually regain our Swarupa. Liberation means renovation of this stage of Swarupa. In that perfect stage of Swarupa, the living being is established in 5 phases of loving service, one of which is the stage of Madhurya Rasa, or the humor of conjugal love. So actually there are 12 mellows or rasas, 5 plus 7. So the 5 primary ones are the Santa, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. And apart from these 5 primary ones, we also have the 7 secondary rasas. So out of these 5, the Madhurya rasa is considered the topmost rasa. The Lord is always perfect in himself, and thus he has no hankering for himself. He, however, becomes a master, a friend, a son, or husband to fulfill the intense love of the devotee concerned. Herein, 2 classes of devotees of the Lord are mentioned in the stage of conjugal love. One is Swakiya and the other is Parakiya. So in Nectar of Devotion, the Nectar of Devotion book is also available on Vedabase. So in that book, a lot of detailing is given regarding all these mellows, and because even for each of the 5 mellows, the 5 rasas, there are further subcategorization. So similarly, even in the Madhurya rasa, there are these 2 subcategories, Swakiya and Parakiya. So these further details are all available in the book Nectar of Devotion. Both of them are in conjugal love with the personality of Godhead, Krishna. The queens at Dwarka were Swakiya, or duly married wives, but the damsels of Raja were young friends of the Lord while he was unmarried. The Lord stayed at Vrindavana till the age of 16, and his friendly relations with the neighboring girls were in terms of Parakiya. These girls, as well as the queens, underwent severe penances by taking vows, bathing, and offering sacrifices in the fire as prescribed in the scriptures. The rites, as they are not an end in themselves, nor are fructification, culture of knowledge, or perfection in mystic powers ends in themselves. So, as mentioned earlier, all these religious rituals do not actually represent the end goal. It's not that simply by performing all these religious rites, it's not that we have accomplished something huge in terms of bhakti. The culmination of all these activities, so that is true bhakti. It's not just simply by performing so much of sacrifices or other types of rites. It that may not necessarily guarantee that we attain pure devotional service. They are all means to attain to the highest stage of Swarupa, to render constitutional transcendental service to the Lord. Even in Gita chapter 16, in the chapter on divine and demoniac natures, so after describing about the divine nature, Krishna also talks about the demoniac natures. And in those verses, like in 16.16 onwards, 16.16, 17, 18, in those verses, Krishna also talks about the demoniac personalities who also engage in performing all these so-called religious rituals, but only for the purpose of showing off. The exact word used is dambena vidipurvakam, means all those demoniac personalities, like for example, we have the examples of Hiranyakashipu and Ravana. Even they were engaged in so-called devotional service, I mean from their perspective, but we clearly know that whatever austerities that they were performing, all those were in the demoniac mood, because they actually wanted, they were so foolish to the point where they wanted to get boons from the exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord, like Brahma and Shiva, to kind of defeat the Supreme Lord. So ultimately, such demoniac personalities, they had to, they were shown their place by the Supreme Lord. So all these so-called rituals and mere austerities, they do not necessarily guarantee, that we attain the topmost level of bhakti. It all depends on how sincere are we to regain our Swarupa. So the end goal is actually to realize that we are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. If we engage in so many so-called rituals with the intention of trying to defeat the Supreme Lord and grab his position, so that will never guarantee us any bhakti. The proper intention should be to regain our Swarupa, to regain our original identity as eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. Only that will guarantee that we attain the topmost level of bhakti. Each and every living being has his individual position in one of the above mentioned 5 different kinds of reciprocating means with the Lord. In one's pure spiritual form of Swarupa, the relation becomes manifest without mundane affinity. The kissing of the Lord, either by his wives or his young girlfriends who aspire to have the Lord as their fancy, is not of any mundane perverted quality. Had such things been mundane, a liberated soul like Sukhidev would not have taken the trouble to relish them, nor would Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu have been inclined to participate in those subjects after renouncing worldly life. The stage is earned after many lives of penance. So both the Swakiya and Parakiya rasas under the category of Madhuri rasa, they are the topmost rasa. But even if you look at the Goloka chart, in the Goloka region, Goloka Vrindavana is actually the topmost, followed by Mathura and Dwaraka, and even the entire hierarchy of the expansions of the Supreme Lord is shown. Like he's there in Goloka Vrindavana in his Swayam Rupa, Swayam Bhagavan, and then all his expansions are shown how he is present in the sub regions like below Goloka Vrindavan is Mathura and Dwaraka. So the gopis of Vrindavan, they are actually in even though they are in separation, they do not really get to be as close to Supreme Lord like the queens of Dwaraka, but still their Bhava is the topmost. So that despite the fact that they are not in such a very exalted position as the queens of Dwarka, but still all the gopis keep yearning for is that they simply want to serve Krishna more and more. So they do not really expect any rewards for their service. The only reward that they expect for their service is more service. So that's what bhakti is all about. So even if you look again at the 4 types of people mentioned by Krishna in Gita 7.16, those who are in distress, they pray to Krishna simply to release them of the temporary distress. But Krishna clearly says in the Gita itself, in 7.16, Krishna talks about the persons who are in distress, praying to him. But even in the very next chapter, in 8.15, Krishna talks about how this material world is Dukkalayam Ashashvatam. So as long as we remain in this material world, we are always going to be experiencing distress. And sometimes we experience happiness, and then we'll be experiencing distress. So it's only going to keep repeating. And also we'll always be having all these material needs. So if we are simply going to pray to Krishna for such needs, first of all, forget bhakti. Merely praying to Krishna to fulfill such needs is extremely unwise, because regardless of the type of material body that we are in, we'll always be having such distress and material needs. So first of all, if we realize our current position in this material world, and if we have that Brahma Jignasa, which is exclusive to us as human beings, because regardless of the different levels of consciousness in other forms of living entities, only we are able to engage in spiritual inquiry, in Brahma Jignasa. Only we are able to inquire why are we even here in this material world, and why are we even suffering in this endless cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. So only we have been blessed with the ability to inquire. So we should really make use of that ability to find the right answers. So it is extremely unwise if we are going to completely misinterpret bhakti as a tool to merely fulfill our material needs, or to relieve ourselves from temporary distress. So that is why rediscovering our Swarupa should be the main goal of attaining bhakti. So if we are able to rediscover that identity of ours, that original identity of ours, then we will no longer look at bhakti as a mere tool to satisfy our material needs. We will always be engaged in that consciousness, which enables us to keep yearning for more and more service. It's not that we only have to start our devotional service after going to the spiritual world. We even with the right consciousness, we can always think of Krishna, and even while performing our material duties, we can still perform our material duties itself as devotional service with the right consciousness. And of course, even after being elevated to the spiritual world, still by in realization of our Swarupa, we will still be having the right understanding of our original identity as eternal servants of the Supreme Lord, and we will still be hoping to get the opportunity for more and more service. So that is in line with the footsteps of the gopis. Text 29. The children of these ladies are Pradyumna, Samba, Amba, etc. Ladies like Rukmini, Satyabhama, and Jambavati were forcibly taken away by him from their Swayamvara ceremonies after he defeated many powerful kings headed by Shishupala, and other ladies were also forcibly taken away by him after he killed Bhaumasura and thousands of his assistants. All of these ladies are glorious. Exceptionally qualified daughters of powerful kings were allowed to make a choice of their own bridegrooms in open competition, and such ceremonies were called Swayamvara, or selection of the bridegroom. Because the Swayamvara was an open competition between the rival and valiant princes, such princes were invited by the father of the princess, and usually there were regular fights between the invited princely order in a sporting spirit. But it so happened that sometimes the belligerent princes were killed in such marriage fighting, and the victorious prince was offered the trophy princess for whom so many princes died. Rukmini, the principal queen of Lord Krishna, was the daughter of the king of Vidarbha, who wished that his qualified and beautiful daughter be given away to Lord Krishna, but her eldest brother wanted her to be given away to King Shishupala, who happened to be a cousin of Krishna. So this brother of Rukmini, if I'm not mistaken, his name is Rukma. Even he got killed later on. So actually, even before the Swayamvara, Rukmini had heard so many descriptions about Lord Krishna, and she was very interested to marry Lord Krishna, but the brother of Rukmini was actually he was kind of the villain in the story. So actually, even he was defeated by Lord Krishna along with Shishupal. So there was open competition, and as usual, Lord Krishna emerged successful after harassing Shishupala and other princes by his unrivaled prowess. Rukmini had 10 sons like Pradyumna. There were other queens also taken away by Lord Krishna in a similar way. Full description of this beautiful booty of Lord Krishna will be given in the 10th canto. There were 16,100 beautiful girls who were daughters of many kings and were forcibly stolen by Bhaumasura, who kept them captive for his carnal desire. These girls prayed piteously to Lord Krishna for their deliverance, and the merciful Lord, called by the fervent prayer, released them all by fighting and killing Bhaumasura. All these captive princesses were then accepted by the Lord as his wives. Although in the estimation of society they were all fallen girls, the all-powerful Lord Krishna accepted the humble prayers of these girls and married them with the adoration of queens. So altogether, Lord Krishna had 16,108 queens at Dwarka, and in each of them he begot 10 children. All these children grew up, and each had as many children as the father. The aggregate of the family numbered in the millions. So these 16,000 queens, they were all queens of Dwarka, And there are also descriptions in the 10th canto about how when Narada Muni went to Dwarka, he actually saw these 16,000 palaces, in which in each of the palace there was one queen, and an expansion of Lord Krishna was also present there simultaneously in all the palaces. So it was not like he was visiting each and every palace at one time. He was present. All his expansions were present in all the palaces. So that's why when we talk about the definition of Bhagavan, as we have seen from even in the Gita, in Gita 2.2, when Krishna starts to talk for the first time, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, in the purport for that verse, Srila Prabhupada gives the definition of the term Bhagavan according to two aspects. In the first half of the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the meaning of Bhagavan from the according to the levels of realization. Srila Prabhupada talks about the definition of Bhagavan in terms of the three levels, starting from the impersonal Raman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan realization. Then in the second half of the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the meaning of the word Bhagavan based on the definition given by Parashara Muni, based on the six opulences, that is unlimited wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, and renunciation. So Krishna being the king of Dwarka, and with so many queens, he provided the status of queens in so many palaces, and he was also personally present in all the palaces through his various expansions. So that itself shows how he has unlimited wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, and renunciation. Actually, for us, due to our false ego, we always tend to, just because even if we have some strengths, we tend to be so puffed up, and even that one or two types of strengths, we tend to be so puffed up, and it is always very limited. But Lord Krishna, despite having all those opulences in abundance, his opulence of renunciation is also there. Meaning, despite having so many opulences, he is always willing to renounce everything for the sake of the love of his devotees. For example, he was willing to become the chariot driver of Arjuna. So that is also explained in the purport for Gita 18.78. In the last verse of Gita, the purport contains explanation about how Lord Krishna, despite having all the other opulences, the topmost is the fact that he also has this opulence of renunciation. He is willing to even renounce everything when it comes to helping the devotees. So this is a very important characteristic that we have to observe while trying to understand the notion of Bhagavan. Even the word Bhagavan itself, the meaning is that the owner of opulences. The word Bhaga means opulence in Sanskrit. So it simply means the one who has many opulences, and specifically it refers to the six opulences mentioned by Parashara Muni. So and it has also been proven from the pastimes of Lord Krishna about how he has all these opulences. Like even as a 7-year-old child, he could lift the Govardhana hill. So that shows his unlimited strength and his beauty. Despite having his dark complexion, his beauty is the one of the most popularly talked about aspects in not just in Bhagavatam, but also in Brahma Samhita and in many other prayers. So all these are proven from the Puranas and also from other literature. So those who claim to be incarnations of Bhagavan, they should actually first look at their face in the mirror and try to find, even if they have one of the 6 opulences, at least in a very tiny quantity. But the sad fact is that even in actually in Bharat, there's always this popular perception that the South is more educated than the North. But if we look at the entire nation, this problem of superstition and believing in false godmen, it prevails until now, and it is all due to the ignorance of people. And of course, as we have just seen from the previous verse, they are always looking for temporary material benefits. They go to all these fake godmen and get trapped, because they are always going after all these temporary material benefits. So that is not bhakti. So if we follow what has been mentioned by our acharyas in the scriptures, like Parashara Muni himself, he was the father of Vyasadev, and Vyasadev, he is also our foremost acharya in our sampradaya. So if we simply follow the instructions given by our acharyas, we will not be fooled by all these fake godmen. So we can clearly understand who is Bhagavan, and with such clear understanding, we can follow the proper path towards developing pure bhakti. But unfortunately, since in our community, people are so busy with learning about scriptures from cinema and serial, so that's what happens. Then of course they'll get fooled by all these fake godmen. Text 30. All these women auspiciously glorified their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. Their husband, the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, never left them alone at home. He always pleased their hearts by making valuable presentations. Now, this verse talks about the 16,000 women who were first captured by Bhamasura, and they were released by Lord Krishna after defeating Bhamasura. The devotees of the Lord are purified souls. As soon as the devotees surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord sincerely, the Lord accepts them, and thus the devotees at once become free from all material contaminations. Such devotees are above the 3 modes of material nature. There is no bodily disqualification of a devotee, just as there is no qualitative difference between the Ganga water and the filthy drain water when they are amalgamated. Women merchants and laborers are not very intelligent, and thus it is very difficult for them to understand the signs of God or to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. They are more materialistic, and less than them are the Kiratas, Punas, Andhras, Pulindas, Pulkashas, Abiras, Kankas, Yavanas, Kasas, etc. But all of them can be delivered if they are properly engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. So this has also been mentioned by Krishna in Gita 9.32. Mam hi pata vyapasritya ye pisho papayonaya striyo vaishastra sutras te piyanti param gatim. So generally the misconception is that bhakti is like meant for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, but in 9.32, Lord Krishna dispels that myth, because he simply says that regardless of whether one is a Stri, Vaishya or Sudra, all of them, as long as they take shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, they can all attain bhakti. By engagement in the service of the Lord, the designative disqualifications are removed, and as pure souls, they become eligible to enter into the kingdom of God. So that's the only qualification, to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, and regardless of our position in society, regardless of our varna or our gender, the only qualification is to completely surrender and take shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. The fallen girls under the clutches of Bhamasura sincerely prayed to Lord Sri Krishna for their deliverance, and their sincerity of purpose made them at once pure by virtue of devotion. The Lord therefore accepted them as his wives, and thus their lives became glorified. Such auspicious glorification was still more glorified when the Lord played with them as the more devoted husband. The Lord used to live with his 16,108 wives constantly. He expanded himself into 16,108 plenary portions, and each and every one of them was the Lord himself, without deviation from the original personality. So this was observed by Narada Muni when he visited Dwaraka. So he saw the 16,000 palaces in which the Supreme Lord was, the expansions of the Supreme Lord was personally present in each of the palaces. So that is the true notion, and that is the true ability of Bhagavan. There is only one, there can be only one. So all these people who get fooled by fake godmen, it is only because they tend to learn about scriptures by watching serials. The Shruti Mantra affirms that the Lord can expand himself into many. As husband of so many wives, he pleased them all with presentations, even at a costly endeavor. He brought the Parijata plant from heaven and implanted it at the palace of Satyabhama, one of the principal queens. If therefore anyone desires the Lord to become one's husband, the Lord fulfills such desires in full. So on one hand, as mentioned earlier in regarding the episode when Lord Krishna agrees to become the chariot driver for Arjuna, so that is also another example of the extent to which the Lord is willing to go for the love of his devotees. So even these queens of Dwarka, they were not merely queens, they attained that status because they were the devotees of the Supreme Lord. So this status was attained by them because of their the rasa which was developed through their pure devotion. So similarly, it has also been mentioned by Lord Krishna in Gita 4.11, Yatamam prapatyate tam vajamyam. So the Lord reciprocates how people behave towards him. So for example, apart from that verse, even in chapter 9, Lord Krishna also mentions that he is equal to everyone. He neither, it's not like he favors someone and he hates others. It's just that he reciprocates according to how we behave towards him. So another example is that okay, in a school or classroom, if when the teacher is teaching, the teacher teaches to all the students in the classroom, but suppose if there are 40 students, only 4 or maybe only one of the 4 out of the 40 would always want to ask questions and approach the teacher for further clarification. So by doing so, automatically special relationship will develop between the student and the teacher, compared to all the other students who simply go and sit in the classroom and simply listen to the lecture. So those students who do not approach the teacher, they should not blame the teacher about being favorable towards that one student. The thing is that that student is always willing to approach the teacher to ask questions and also to ask for more clarifications. So in that case, it is the student who makes the extra effort to learn more from the teacher. So the teacher would, of course, the teacher would reciprocate in a similar manner. So we can neither blame that teacher or that student. Instead, all the other students, if they also want extra knowledge, they should also approach the teacher to ask for more, apart from simply sitting in the classroom and to simply spend time like that. So similarly, the more we approach Krishna, he will reciprocate similarly. And for all of us who have started our journey in Krishna consciousness, I'm sure we must have also felt about how Krishna reciprocates towards us the more we intensify our sadhana. So we must have experienced it in our daily life ever since we started. So that's how the Supreme Lord is always willing to reciprocate according to how we behave towards him. Text 31. While the ladies of the capital Hastinapura were greeting him and talking in this way, the Lord, smiling, accepted their good greetings, and casting the grace of his glance over them, he departed from the city. Maharaj Yudhishthira, although no one's enemy, engaged 4 divisions of defense: horse, elephant, chariot, and army to accompany Lord Krishna, the enemy of the Asuras, demons. The Maharaja did this because of the enemy and also out of affection for the Lord. Natural defensive measures are horses and elephants combined with chariots and men. Horses and elephants are trained to move to any part of the hills or forests and plains. The charioteers could fight with many horses and elephants by the strength of powerful arrows, even up to the standard of the Brahmastra, similar to modern atomic weapons. Maharaj Yudhishthira knew well that Krishna is everyone's friend and well-wisher, and yet there were asuras who were by nature envious of the Lord. So out of fear of attack from others and out of affection also, he engaged all varieties of defensive forces as bodyguards of Lord Krishna. If required, Lord Krishna himself was sufficient to defend himself from the attack of others who countered the Lord as their enemy. But still he accepted all the arrangements made by Maharaj Yudhishthira because he could not disobey the king, who was his elder cousin. The Lord placed the part of a subordinate in his transcendental spotting, and thus sometimes he puts himself in the care of Yasudha Mata for his protection in his so-called helplessness of childhood. That is the transcendental lila or pastime of the Lord. The basic principle for all transcendental exchanges between the Lord and his devotees is exhibited to enjoy a transcendental bliss for which there is no comparison, even up to the level of Brahmananda. So in the pastime of Damodar Lila, the Supreme Lord, he kind of reduces himself to a state of helplessness to the point where he allows himself to be bound by the ropes of Yasodhamani. And also in this case, even in the earlier chapters, we saw in the prayers of Queen Kunti, even from those prayers, the Pandavas and even Queen Kunti, they all understood that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as also been revealed by Bhishma Pitama, also in the previous chapter. So they all knew about Lord Krishna's true position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But still, Maharaj Yudhishthira, out of his love for his cousin, he was making all the arrangements. And on the other hand, Lord Krishna himself, he was willing to appreciate the love of Maharaj Yudhishthira, being the supreme person who has so many opulences in abundance, unlimited wealth, beauty, strength. Despite having all these qualities, he did not try to degrade Maharaj Yudhishthira by saying that no, I'm the supreme person, I don't need all your help. So he did not say such things. He was willing to appreciate the love and care of his elder cousin. So these are the truly unique qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Despite having so many opulences, he is always willing to remain humble just for the sake of his beloved devotees, just to reciprocate the love of his devotees. So we can never even think about having such level of humility if we all have such levels of opulence. That's the difference between us as living entities and the transcendental person, Purushottam. Text 33. Out of profound affection for Lord Krishna, the Pandavas, who were of the Kuru dynasty, accompanied him a considerable distance to see him off. They were overwhelmed with the thought of future separation. The Lord, however, persuaded them to return home, and he proceeded towards Dwaraka with his dear companions. O Shaunaka, the Lord then proceeded towards Kurujangala, Panchala, Surasena, the land on the bank of the river Yamuna, Brahmavata, Kurukshetra, Matsya, Saraswata, the province of the desert and the land of scanty water. After crossing these provinces, he gradually reached the Shauvira and Abira provinces. Then, west of these, reached Dwaraka at last. The provinces passed over by the Lord in those days were differently named, but the direction given is sufficient to indicate that he traveled through Delhi, Punjab, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Saurashtra, and Gujarat, and at last reached his home province at Dwarka. We do not gain any profit simply by researching the analogous provinces of those days up to now, but it appears that the desert of Rajasthan and the provinces of scanty water like Madhya Pradesh were present even 5,000 years ago. The theory of soil experts that the desert developed in recent years is not supported by the statements of Bhagavatam. We may leave the matter for expert geologists to research because the changing universe has different phases of geological development. We are satisfied that the Lord has now reached his own province, Dwarkadama, from the Kuru provinces. Kurukshetra continues to exist since the Vedic age, and it is sheer foolishness when interpreters ignore or deny the existence of Kurukshetra. So, our business as devotees is to relish the pastimes of the Supreme Lord without really paying any heed to all these so-called modern scientists, because for them, few years back, they would say that the sun is stationary, and then they'll talk about the velocity of the sun. So that is what Prabhupada is trying to emphasize here. Text 36. On his journey through these provinces, he was welcomed, worshipped, and given various presentations. In the evening, in all places, the Lord systemated his journey to perform evening rites. This was regularly observed after sunset. It is said here that the Lord observed the religious principles regularly while he was on the journey. There are certain philosophical speculations that even the Lord is under the obligations of fructification, but actually this is not the case. So again, as mentioned by Lord Krishna in Gita 9.11, Avajanati Mamuda, Manushim Tanu Ashritam, Parambhava Majananto, Mamabhuta Maheshwaram. So in that verse, Lord Krishna says that people tend to regard the Supreme Lord as a normal human being. Just because he has a human-like appearance, people tend to equate the Supreme Lord to normal human beings, but that is not the case. He does not depend on the action of any good or bad work. The Supreme Person, the Supreme Transcendental Supreme Person, Purushottam, he is transcendental, meaning he is beyond all dualities, like good or bad work. Since the Lord is absolute, everything done by him is good for everyone. But when he descends to the earth, he acts for the protection of the devotees and for the annihilation of the impious non-devotees. So as mentioned in Gita 4.8, although he has no obligatory duty, still he does everything so that others may follow. That is the way of factual teaching. One must act properly himself and teach the same to others. Otherwise, no one will accept one's blind teaching. He is himself the awarder of fruitive results. He is self-sufficient, and yet he acts according to the rulings of the revealed scripture in order to teach us the process. If he does not do so, the common man may go wrong. But in the advanced stage, when one can understand the transcendental nature of the Lord, one does not try to imitate him. That this is not possible. Even in the Gita 3.21, Lord Krishna says, Yajyaracharajistretas Tata Devetaro Jana Sayat Pramanam Kurte Lokas Tatanu Vartate. Then in 3.22, also Lord Krishna continues to explain. This is actually in the third chapter on Karma Yoga, when Arjuna actually asks, why are you asking me to engage in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is the best. So Lord Krishna explains that even him being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he, when he descends to the earth, he is still engaged in doing his duties. After 3.21, in one of the verses, also, Lord Krishna says that if he does not do his duty, he himself will be the cause for creating unwanted population. In the first chapter of Gita, when Arjuna is trying to argue with Lord Krishna, Lord Krishna starts to talk in chapter 2, but before that, in chapter 1, when Arjuna is trying to justify by giving reasons for not fighting, he says that if the Kauravas are eliminated in the battle and the women are without protection, then they become polluted and it causes Varna Sankara, meaning the unwanted population. Arjuna tries to argue by putting forth that point, but in the third chapter, Lord Krishna counters by saying that if the demoniac people are not eliminated, that itself will cause unwanted population, meaning there will be more population of demoniac people who are going to always harass the devotees. So that's why in 4.8, Krishna says, Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chaduskridam Dharma Samsthapanataya Sambhami Yuge Yuge. Lord Krishna descends to the material world to protect the devotees by destroying the demons. So if he does not perform his duty, he himself will be the reason for expansion of the population of these demoniac personalities who will keep harassing the devotees. So that's why in Gita 3.21, Lord Krishna talks about the importance of leadership by example. He himself, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he shows the example of how to remain engaged in performing one's duty to educate others, so that the common people are not misled by a bad example. And apart from that, the role of a spiritual master is also similar to what Lord Krishna says. Our spiritual masters are known as acharyas because they educate us through practical example, through their own behavior. They do not simply tell the disciples to be engaged in sadhana. They themselves establish very high standards, like Srila Prabhupada was merciful enough to allow us to, he set the minimum requirement of 16 rounds for chanting. Of course, that is the minimum, but based on the standards set by Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur, 64 was the minimum. Anything below 64 was considered a fallen state. But our acharyas, though they set standards for disciples by their own personal standards, they do it 2 or 3 times more. Like Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur was chanting like 192 rounds, based on what I've heard from lectures of other devotees. So the Acharya actually gives instructions to disciples, but he himself also sets his own personal standards very high to set a good example. So that is the difference between Acharyas compared to school teachers who give all sorts of advice to students, but they themselves will be speaking in the washroom. The Lord in human society does what is the duty of everyone, but sometimes he does something extraordinary and not to be imitated by the living being. His acts of evening prayer, as stated herein, must be followed by the living being, but it is not possible to follow his mountain lifting or dancing with the gopis. One cannot imitate the sun, which can exhaust water even from a filthy place. The most powerful can do something which is all good, but our imitation of such acts will put us into endless difficulty. Therefore, in all actions, the experienced guide, the spiritual master, who is the manifested mercy of the Supreme Lord, should always be consulted, and the path of progress will be assured. So there's this distinction between following the footsteps of the Supreme Lord and trying to emulate him. The demoniac personalities like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, they were actually trying to emulate the Supreme Lord in order to grab his position. And we know what happened to them. So that's why we should not try to emulate the Supreme Lord. We should merely follow his footsteps or simply follow his instructions. In Gita 18.65, Lord Krishna says, Man mana bhava mat bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mami avaisati satyam te prajane prayosime. Then in 18.66, Krishna says, Sarva dharman pratyajya mam ekam saranam raja ahum tvam sarva bhavebhyo moksheshami masucha. So in those concluding verses, Lord Krishna kind of summarizes everything, and he makes it the simplest form of instruction that we have to follow. So we just have to follow the instructions of the Supreme Lord and also the instructions of the acharyas instead of trying to emulate them. So there is a difference between the two, as explained here. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 10th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwarka. So we have completed chapter 10. Thank you all for attending despite the short notice. I'm very sorry for that. Today I forgot to post the invitation. Thank you, and any questions? Okay, so we'll meet next week.